Good evening, folks. Welcome to the third Climate Change Education webinar series event. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes for folks to join us, and then we'll get going. So we're just going to wait one more minute for folks to join us. Thanks for your question, Dan. Yes, we have posted recordings for the first two webinars on the website, the same website that you registered for this climate change education webinar series. So if you're interested, you can go to the website, which I've just posted to the chat, and watch those on your own time. And just while we're waiting, if you could respond to the following three questions that have just popped up. Um, who are you? What grade levels do you teach or support learning in? And do you currently incorporate learning or support learning on climate change in your practicum or practice? If you could respond to those, that would be fantastic, and we'll get going right away. Okay, good evening, everyone. Hello, pre-service teachers from across Manitoba, in-service teachers, support teachers, administrators, policymakers, post-secondary educators. Welcome to the third of seven webinar workshops on climate change education in the Manitoba K-12 education system. I'm thrilled to welcome Heather Ecton for the third webinar this evening. Heather Ecton has devoted over 20 years to public education and is an advocate for amplifying student voice. Currently, she serves as the Climate Action Divisional Teacher Team Leader in Seven Oaks School Division, supporting climate action across 28 K-12 schools. Heather is also an active member of the Educators for Climate Action, Manitoba, and the UNESCO Associated Schools Project Network in Manitoba. She's concurrently pursuing a PhD at the U of M, where she's also a Shirk doctoral fellow. Her research focuses on excellence in climate change education and transformational learning. So I'm really happy to welcome Heather here today. Lots of experience on the ground in the K-12 education system, supporting and doing the dirty work herself. So I'd like to welcome Heather and yeah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Will, for that introduction and also for your leadership as well in planning these webinar series. But a lot of gratitude to everyone here today. I realize you had a busy day of teaching or maybe not teaching, but you're joining us to grow the good for climate change education in Manitoba. And this is something I'm very passionate about, so I'm happy to share with you. Growing the good, climate action in K-12 schools. So as Will mentioned, I am a climate action divisional teacher team leader, and I'm also an educational researcher that looks at excellence in climate change education and transformational learning. And I share this because Not because I have all the answers, because I have many questions about how to do this in a good way. Before I begin, I'd like to share my own land acknowledgement with you. As a settler on these lands, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you from Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the national homeland of the Red River Métis. I have a tremendous gratitude to the Indigenous peoples that have cared for these lands since time immemorial and continue to fight for land and water protection and to care for all our relations. My Scottish and Anglo-Irish family settled in Placentia Bay, Newfoundland, Valcartier, Quebec, and Moosomin, Saskatchewan, and I was born and live here in Treaty 1 in the city of Winnipeg. I'm committed to climate justice through restoring reciprocity to land, truth and reconciliation, and the 94 calls to action. I'm moving forward in peace and partnership with all peoples. I would also like to share with you these pictures of Lake Winnipeg, and I'm sharing them for two reasons. First, I invite you to think about this question. How can we ensure that land acknowledgements include actionable commitments that promote healthy land, air, water, and soil, ensuring a stable climate for future generations? I really believe land acknowledgements must go beyond words, and they should include actionable commitments to protect our land, water, and climate for future generations. Reflecting on the treaties meant to last, and I quote, as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. We have a duty to ensure a healthy environment for all. Lake Winnipeg was designated the most threatened lake in the world by the Global Nature Fund in 2013, and it remains at serious risk today. The harmful blue-green algae blooms, visible even from space as seen on the image on the left, highlight the need for urgent action. The Lake Winnipeg Indigenous Collective and the Lake Winnipeg Foundation have long urged us to take responsibility for protecting this vital watershed, but we are not hopeless in helping the lake. What you see in the picture in the middle and on the right are pictures I actually took at Winnipeg Beach, and you can see the eerie color of the cyanobacteria, and this extended from Winnipeg Beach all the way to Gimli. The second reason I want to share these pictures is that climate change exacerbates extreme weather events in Manitoba. Flood and prolonged droughts, leading to what many scientists call water whiplash. And along with the droughts come even more severe forest fires. This deeply affects communities, especially our children. You know, I was a classroom teacher for 20 years before entering this role, and I was teaching a lesson about the Kiribati Islands, a low-lying chain of islands in the Pacific Ocean, and about climate refugees. One of my students in my class shared their own experience as a climate refugee, recalling their evacuation from Lake St. Martin as a young child. The catastrophic flood of 2011 devastated cropland in Manitoba. It cost taxpayers $1 billion to mitigate and forced many from Lake St. Martin to leave their home community permanently. So I share this because we have climate refugees in our classrooms. It reminds us of the urgent need for action in education. And I really believe that education can inspire change and empower us to respond. So just a brief overview of what I'd like to share with you today. You know, I was thinking perhaps you're a pre-service teacher or in-service teacher, maybe you're an administrator or somebody in the system who really wants to grow the good. So I want to share with you 5 key insights about growing the good. And I have these insights both from my lived experience as a climate action divisional teacher team leader and helping teachers do this work in their classrooms, and also through my research. And the second thing I want to talk about is where do we want to be? I'm going to give you some tricks that I feel work quite well with growing the good, a methodology I've come to love known as participatory action research, and I'll introduce some whole school approaches to climate action as well. And then how are we going to get there? I'm going to propose that we think seriously about climate action planning and what that could look like. And I'll end this talk with sharing resources. I've prepared a Google Drive that has a lot of things in there to get you started and save some time for question and answers. But I'm actually going to ask that you reflect on this question as a provocation to begin. In one word, how do you feel about the state of the environment right now? If you just want to add in the chat one word, this can be challenging to do, but I often ask this question with students and with teachers, and I'm always surprised about the range of responses that come from this. All right, yeah, wow. And if I were to sum up, these words, I often hear from people that they don't come from a very hopeful place. And that's a bit problematic. And I'm not disregarding how you feel, but if people feel like our actions can't actually make a difference, we're less likely to act. And so, oops, sorry about that. There we go. So, I realize that climate change is a pressing issue, and many organizations are saying we have urgent work to do. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, also known as the IPCC, suggests that we have to reduce greenhouse gases by 43% by the year 2030 to not exceed, critical temperatures before tipping points are reached. And this picture that you see here, this is an incredible group of students, and this dates back to 2019. This group of students was so empowered by the climate action strike of 2019 that they did an amazing presentation to the school board. And it was because of their presentation that on December 9th, 2019, Seven Oaks School Division declared a climate emergency. And as far as I know, I think we are the first school board in all of Manitoba to declare an emergency, a climate emergency. Please put in the chat if I'm wrong about that. But that's significant because it opens possibilities for the work that needs to be done. It also justifies having a position like my own, somebody dedicated to climate action, and it allows us to grow the good. I also want to amplify student voices in my talk tonight. So I have an excerpt from a poem from a middle year student at A. Wright. If we won't stop now, we will be the ones to pay. What we do now will affect our future generations. There are many ways to help the earth every day, and there are no limitations. These are images from the Winnipeg Climate Action Strike in 2019. Were you there? It was an amazing day. I mean, estimates at between 10,000 to 12,000 people attended, many which were young people. And there was a real momentum going at that time. And I think the pandemic really kind of set us back, but I'm starting to feel that momentum grow again. And this is really important because never has there been such a critical time to really inspire hope with young people. There was a prominent study done by Galway and Field in 2023 that looked at the mental health impacts on young people. 78% of young people feel climate change impacts their overall mental health, and nearly half are extremely worried that climate change threatens people and the planet. I have more poetry from young people here, and I just took little clips from their poems and read together. It's almost like entangled poetry. So I actually want to read it to you because you can hear their voices. Seas rising up like a giant breath, got the world shaking, heading towards death. Still we got the power to turn it all around. If we take action, keep our feet on the ground. Many animals are losing their homes. These wildfires are destroying biomes. To stop these fires, we need a solution because they are committing too much pollution. People not being able to stand the heat. Climate change keeps sending the people to the streets. We have the voices, but they don't let us speak. always making promises that they don't keep. Consequences of our actions causing severe climate reactions. We are the problem. We are the solution. Now let's start a revolution. On the right here is a mural that one of my students painted a few years ago. And you don't really get the scale of this image, but to put into perspective, it's probably, 3 meters in length. And it's on a huge panel that sits in the hallway outside of my former classroom. I asked this grade 11 student to show me the state of the planet through the medium of paint. And it was at his exhibition where he spoke about this art that I realized what he was feeling. When we talk about the climate crisis and ocean acidification and the loss of species, the sixth mass extinction, the list went on. And as he was presenting to his peers, I realized that maybe I had asked the wrong question. I had, if I could go back, I would actually have asked, can you show me a more beautiful world that you know is possible through the medium of paint? Because part of what we have to do is to not, just be complacent into the climate crisis we're living right now, but to take action so that we ensure a more beautiful world. So my very first key insight I want to share with you is that youth need climate hope to envision a more beautiful world. And they need you to come from that place as well. And hope isn't found through, visualizing a hopeful future. I think hope comes from collective action, collective community action. The Yale program on climate change communication tried to simplify how we communicate about climate change. They boiled it down to 5 facts and 10 words. Here it is. Scientists agree, it's real, it's us, it's bad, and there's hope. But I argue if you're working with young people through climate change education, hope has to come first. As the adults in the room that care about this, I think it's important to understand the complexities of climate change education, because climate change education actually has, educating about the climate and what climate change really is, but it also has a shift that's needed in what we're doing in the education system. And I've often heard that climate change is like this massive backpack that we're passing on to the next generation. And if you were to unpack this heavy backpack, like what's in there? I took a fantastic course this summer with Dr. Catherine Riley, and we really grappled with the root causes of climate change. We had conversations about colonization, globalization, neoliberalism, advanced capitalism. But those really strong interconnected forces, are really contributing to a triple threat. It's not just climate change. I mean, we have climate change, we have the sixth mass extinction, and we have rising amounts of pollution. So without addressing the root causes, we will never actually solve the problem. So it's really important that we think about that. And when we're thinking about this, I always frame this work through the lens of climate justice. So how do we address the inequities that exist? And who's feeling the weight of climate change the most? Because we know that it's not the same for everyone on the planet. And more importantly, who's doing the heavy lifting to really work on this issue? The other big shift that's needed is how we see ourselves on this planet. If you believe that you're a separate human being, separate from the earth, and that you are not connected, that's really problematic in this work. And so there needs to be a shift to an ecological worldview, which is very much an indigenous worldview. Over a decade ago, I read the book Braiding Sweetgrass, and I know a lot of you have probably read it because it's a very popular book. But Robin Wall Kimmerer and this quote, I just love it so much. Knowing the earth loves you, or knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms a relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. And here is a picture of students that are experiencing land-based learning. Such a powerful thing to do. These students went to the Bannock Point petroforms and they were receiving teachings from Elder Ron Bell on all of these different petroforms that you can find in the white shell. And I promise you, it's moments like that that really stick with young people and can start to shift how they see themselves in the world. Now, how do we shift education to be aligned with what we need to do with climate change education? Well, I'm seeing a lot of this in classrooms, which is a really hopeful thing. I read an article by Verley and Flynn, and I'll share that later in the resources, but this quote really stuck with me. What if education is not the solution, but part of the system young people want to change? I mean, there's this growing gap between this world we're living with and all these complex things going on and what we're trying to do in classrooms. We're shifting from an education system that prepares students from knowing a bunch of things in the world to actually making a meaningful difference in the world. And so to do that, it's embracing all sorts of different pedagogies, including inquiry, project-based learning, experiential learning. You really want, students to experience real world experiences and it goes beyond the classroom walls. So how do we embrace land-based learning and place-based education and really focusing on not learning about everything, but more so learning in depth and understanding it's through learning in depth that you get creative thinking and complex thinking and global competencies, and the list goes on. I'm also an advocate of mentorship. We need to be mentored in this work because we don't have all the answers. And to take a solution approach to the work we're doing with kids, that's very transdisciplinary. So in high school, siloing into different disciplines makes it really hard, but it can still be done. And so I have another provocation for you. And this is more of a thought experiment. Now, it's not my thought experiment, but I read a book this summer called The Good Ancestor by Roman Krznaric. And he speaks a lot about, how can we be good ancestors to the future generations to ensure a viable planet? And so the thought experiment goes like this. I want you to think of a young person that you really care about today. Ideally, this person is under the age of 10, let's say. So I'm going to think of my own kiddo who's 8 years old. And so now I want you to imagine this young person later on in life. They're now in their middle years of life. And I want you to imagine them holding a baby. Maybe it's their baby, maybe it's somebody else's baby, but they're holding this baby and they're facing a window and they're looking out the window. What do you hope that baby sees when they look out the window? Now, I want you to push even further into the future, and I want you to imagine that same child you care about is now much, much older. They're in their senior years. Maybe it's the year 2100. My son will be 84 years old if he's still around. And I want you to imagine, maybe it's a big birthday, maybe it's their 80th or their 90th birthday, and they're gathered by friends and family, and they take a look out the window. What do you hope that they see then? Because when we do these sorts of imaginings, we realize that the future really isn't that far away. And what we have to do, the work that we have to do now touches the future in such a way that if we don't act now, later is too late. Later is too late. So I think that's a good thing to consider, and you can do that with students as well. Now, I want to share with you, my thinking around climate action pedagogy And this has been very much a journey that I've taken as both a PhD student at the University of Manitoba. I've had many wonderful mentors there, and also in my work in Seven Oaks School Division, because many educators will ask me, what does climate change education look like for me in my class with my grade level? And so I think climate change education happens from K to 12, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. With our youngest learners, kindergarten to grade 2, really climate change education is all about an ethic of care. And by an ethic of care, I mean reciprocity to the earth, feeling that connected relationship to the earth, and empathy for all life forms. And so that requires, getting children outside, interacting with all sorts of life forms to really have that connection. By grades 3 to 5, gaining eco literacy, understanding that humans, take all sorts of actions in the world, but we can make positive changes in the world too. And by grade 6 to 8, that's when, young people really have heard, about the severity of the climate crisis and the sixth mass extinction. And so that can feel really heavy. So it's really important to navigate those emotions through social emotional learning and to help them find a hopeful place through action. By the time students are in grade 9 to 12, it's my wish that every student, has big cares in the world and is taking action about what they care about in line with their gifts. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on because I call that concept, following your North Star. Now, although this looks like a continuum, I really hesitate calling it a continuum because it's more looping. It goes around and around. It's very circular. And it's just to wrap our heads around what different, age, levels could be exploring in terms of pedagogy. Along the whole, circle of pedagogies should be Indigenous teachings and land-based learning using elders and knowledge keepers. You want students to lead the way in terms of action projects, and we want to frame this work around planetary regeneration and well-being. So my second key insight for you, and this is a big one, awareness does not equal action. Action equals action. So as a teacher, don't just teach climate change as cursory knowledge and what's going on. If you're going to do that, invite students to take deep, meaningful action in different ways. And if we do that in our education system, from grade, from the littlest to the oldest students, that can be very transformative. So I have some pictures here of students in Seven Oaks. On the left, you have a group of middle year school students from our Ojibwe language program. They went to a Learning for Sustainable Future Climate Action Forum, which was an amazing day. And they received grant money to do student-led climate action. And on the right, we have students from the Exchange Met School that weren't just learning about, the issues facing Lake Winnipeg. They went out to visit Lake Winnipeg and were mentored by the scientists on the Nemeo vessel to learn about water research as well. So I'm going to share with you now a methodology that I think is the best one that we can use with climate change education, in particular with schools. It's called participatory action research, and it has 3 big pillars. It has participation, and what's so great about the participation is that your participants are participant researchers. So it's very much a democratic form of research, and collectively as a community, perhaps as a school or a group of teachers, you decide on what actions to take on issues that are impacting you. So in my field, I help teachers look at climate actions. And then you want to really understand your actions and the impact they have. So that's where the research comes in. And it's very kind of cyclical, and you loop around these big questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? It's a wonderful thing to do. And I'm going to share with you the very first time I discovered participatory action research was actually when I was teaching in the classroom. So I was doing my master's degree, and for my part of my thesis work, I wanted to look at sustainability. So back then we were talking a lot about education for sustainability. I knew there was pockets of this work happening in my urban high school, but I wasn't convinced it was a whole school approach. And so I was like, okay, how can we engage staff and students to ask questions of where are we now, where do we want to be, and how are we going to get there? So we had, I had focus groups of teachers, there was surveys done with students, and through purposeful dialogue, it was very interesting to find out the barriers that existed to doing that work. And some of the key barriers were the fact that we had in high school these siloed discipline areas that were kind of disjointed. It didn't leave a lot of room to address the complexities of climate change through a scientific, a social, and a cultural lens. And there was also the barrier of time. It's very hard to get outside and do land-based or place-based learning when you have an hour and 15 minutes and then the next subject area starts. And so the Sustainable Living Academy Manitoba was the result of participatory action research. We found out that some of the barriers were the very systems in place in the school. So we were able to really kind of reimagine the system to create a half-day program for grade 11 and 12 students that really want to learn in different ways. We offered credits like current topics in science and topics in Indigenous studies. And through that, had really meaningful learning experiences that involved internships out in the community, mentorships, and so much more. Now, unfortunately, SLAM was also a victim of the pandemic, but it just goes to show you, as an educational leader, you can do amazing things. Don't let the systems you're in be the barrier to the good work that needs to be done. I also want to talk about, the many opportunities we try to create in Seven Oaks School Division to give climate action leadership some events to have these critical conversations. We had quite a few climate action student and educator forums, and having both students and teachers come together was an amazing experience. I spoke already about the middle years climate action forum. Now that was done in partnership with Learning for a Sustainable Future. And I believe partnerships are very valuable in this work. So the more that you can reach out to local organizations and partner on events, this can be powerful. And I also want to have an event for high school students because they are just so ready to jump into this work. And so we had a high school climate justice symposium where students led the day. They led the learning, they led the workshops, they had the questions, and it was a really amazing experience. We also in Seven Oaks School Division wanted to mobilize on the idea of more than just a day for climate change. And so what we talked about is climate action leaders. Every school has a climate action leader, is that teachers seem to be very willing to mobilize on an Earth Day on April 22nd. So we asked ourselves, how can we grow the good and make it more than a day? And so that's where the idea of the Climate Justice Month came into play. So last April, all our schools, all 28 K-12 schools were invited to consider how to make climate a class, how to make climate an event, and how to make a difference. In other words, how do you grow the good in your school? So my third key insight for you today, we must grow the good through collaborative community actions. That's very, very important. So I'm not sure, if you're a teacher or an educational leader, but I will say this, if you find that you're doing this work for the most part by yourself, the best thing you can do is to reflect and pause and think about how you can invite others to do this work with you. How can you find others? Because I guarantee if you put it out there, there's other people who care about this. They may be unsure of how to do this good work, but you need a community to do this work with. And so I'm going to make an invitation right now to really grow the good across all of Manitoba. I think we should do a Climate Action Month across Manitoba in April 2025. Again, maybe a month is not enough. Maybe we need every single day. But for the teachers who are right now just doing a single day, it is an invitation to do this more intentionally and to grow the network beyond just a school division. How do we bring all of our different school divisions and post-secondaries to come together to mobilize on climate change education? So I also mentioned I want to talk about how to take a whole school approach to climate change education. And this is where partnerships come in. So I have a few different options I'm going to speak about because these are different whole school approaches that we use in Seven Oaks School Division. The first one is the UNESCO Associated Schools Project Network, which has a rich history in Manitoba. Currently, we have 35 UNESCO schools, which is really amazing. And Linda Connor always says, you know, we have such a beautiful group of schools. We have rural schools, urban schools, private schools, public schools, and we all come together for the common good of planetary regeneration. This year, we're mobilizing specifically on climate action, but we also look at human rights and democracy, intercultural teaching, and addressing world concerns. So that's a great opportunity to invite other people in. The other whole school approach I want to talk about is sustainable future schools. So Learning for a Sustainable Future has put together this framework to support schools in this work. Most of this work is done through the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and I hope you've seen these before. Now, they don't come without criticisms. I will put that out there. However, I think these are really good goals for humanity and that can really grow the good. And so both of these are out there. They're a little bit different in different ways. Learning for a Sustainable Future has grant money they can offer your school and free professional development. And UNESCO has a rich history here in Manitoba. But I will also say that Seven Oaks School Division right now has 6 UNESCO schools and 3 Sustainable Future schools. And Ecolila North is actually both. So in a way, it's all the same good work. And I want to talk about Leland North as a really bright spot in our school division, only because it's very apparent when you walk through the halls of the school that something's different. I mean, before you even get in the school, there is a chicken coop with chickens, and there's all sorts of gardens that are growing. You go into the school, and there's you know, a second harvest food rescue program. They have aquaponics, and the classrooms are rich with life. And then there's all sorts of different learning experiences for students around the many, many R's beyond recycling to rethink, refuse, reduce, repurpose, recycle, replace, repair, and rot. So it's many teachers doing this together and many students, you know, really into the work. They did an incredible waste audit. You can see they picked up 388 kilograms of trash from their community, diverting it from the ocean essentially. But not only that, they were able to weigh, you know, how much trash and understand what was in their community. Because with this work, we really want to address those root causes. Now, if you're really wondering, like, how do I even start this? I don't know where to start. I will tell you where I started a decade ago. I mean, for 20 years, I was a science teacher. And so I just want to understand the systems we were in. So I had my students audit everything. We did waste audits, energy audits, transportation to school, commute audits, and getting, you know, data. I was teaching them to how to do research as well. But I want to share with you a transformative story. I'll call it a transformative story. You know, one year, this is back in 2018, I asked my students, from the Sustainable Living Academy Manitoba, which we affectionately called SLAM, to do a waste audit of the entire school. So we had 850 students. We kept the trash for 24 hours, and they had to open up all those bags of trash and sort it into different categories and then weigh it. And then we recorded all that information. On the right here are 4 students that I asked the question, what did you notice about our waste? And they said, there was tons of plastic bags in the trash just thrown away. Like, how wasteful, these single-use plastics. I said, wow, okay, that's a good observation. Why do you think that is? Probably because kids put some food into a plastic bag and they call that lunch, and then they just throw it all away when they're done. And I said, what are you going to do about it? They said, well, we need to stop plastics at its source. So they started an online petition called Ban the Bag Winnipeg. Maybe you even signed this petition. I don't know. But what I do know as a classroom teacher, within a week, they had 1,000 signatures. Within 2 weeks, it was like up to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. And as this petition kept on getting signatures, I watched these kids transform into true leaders. They were doing interviews in the media. They were talking to younger students and doing classroom visits. They were on the radio stations. It was really incredible to see. But they struck a chord with people and they started a conversation about a more beautiful world. And I will share that this ended because we were volunteering at the graduation powwow, an amazing event that we celebrate in Seven Oaks School Division. And the current mayor at the time was at this event, Mayor Brian Bowman. And I said, okay, do you want to meet the mayor? And they said, okay. And we went up to the mayor and I said, Mayor, these are 4 students behind Ban the Bag Winnipeg, an online petition. And he stopped and he put his hands together and he said, hey, I want you to know I've heard about your petition. And it's because of your petition that I've started to talk to other Metro mayors across Canada, and we're planning to do something about it. And soon after that, the phase 1 of the single-use plastic ban was implemented by the federal government. You know, we can never connect the dots to say that these 4 students led to plastic bags being banned, but I can reassure them that they were part of critical conversations that made that happen. And if only we could have all of our students engaged in that deep, rich work of taking action. And so I try to do climate action in hopeful, inspiring ways. And I always try new things. And I'm so excited about this partnership that's an amazing partnership between so many different people. It's climate artivism. Now, climate artivism is a sort of community-based art that engages communities to make a difference. And so this is a partnership between Seven Oaks School Division, the Manitoba Social Studies Teachers Association, UNESCO schools, and Educators for Climate Action. And we have wonderful people working on this project like Dr. Bruno de Oliveira Jamie at the University of Manitoba. We have a wonderful Indigenous scholar, Leah Fontaine, who's also a PhD student, and she's provided us with beautiful imagery of the creation stories of these lands. Rianne Candia, a wonderful teacher who's helped create or prepare the canvas. And this is going to be created throughout the course of the year, starting on MTSPD Day and then through UNESCO schools. And it will finally be displayed in the spring at the Human Rights Museum. Again, to start conversations about why this work matters. Now, if you want to be part of creating that art, I'm going to shamelessly plug MTSPD Day that's happening for MISTA. So you can sign up. There's the information there. It's at Chief Peguis Middle School. I'm really excited about the keynote speaker as well, which is Clayton Thomas Mueller, who is a wonderful Indigenous advocate on, you know, both on treaty rights and climate action. And there's also going to be an Educators for Climate Action bike bus that you can jump on at the Forks to really have a green commute on the way there. So I want to talk about when people come together and have wonderful conversations of what is possible, amazing things happen. And in Seven Oaks School Division, a great example of this is our Aki Center, our land-based learning center. But the name of the center is actually Ojawashwa Anamiki Benishi Aki Onji Kinamage Unun, which stands for the Blue Thunderbird Land-Based Teaching Learning Center. This name was gifted to the center by our incredible elders, Elder Dan Thomas and Elder Dr. Mary Corshane. And this land that the Aki Center is on is 50 acres that's gradually being restored as tallgrass prairie. It's a wonderful site that teachers and students can go to where they learn about the historical and cultural ties of the land, but they can also directly be involved in stewardship. And that's in part because of the amazing people that work there that are truly dedicated to this work. At the top right, you can see our industrial strength composter and Alex, who facilitates this wonderful program, but all 28 of our schools actually compost and divert huge amounts of organic waste. And it's also the site of our bus depot where all of our school division buses are stored. And that's really what led to this possibility. And what started as, you know, a far-fetched possibility is now the most amazing place. So we need more people talking about possibilities because I would love to see every single child have a center they can go to like that. I also want to talk about the BEST Bike program, which stands for the Bicycle Education and Skills Training Program. This is a highly successful program that teaches about 3,000 middle year students every year about safety and sustainable transportation. This pie chart is actually the emissions from 2021 for Manitoba, but you can see where we need to do good work to reduce emissions. You'll see that transportation is 38% of our greenhouse gas emissions, thereby making it the biggest piece of the pie, followed by industrial agriculture at 28%, stationary combustion sources at 19%, and then waste, a huge part, organic waste at 6%. There it is. Those are the dream team. That's the dream team from last year. So as I mentioned, every one of our schools in Seven Oaks School Division has a climate action leader in their school. And if this isn't the case in your school division, this is a wonderful way to grow the good. You need to have those people to come together to do those collaborative community actions. So think about how you can make that happen. And once you have that network in place, other things you can do, you know, visit each other's schools. Last year in the spring, we had many schools that were doing incredible work for climate action. And they were all interested in becoming like taking on a whole school approach to climate action as well. And so we thought, why not set out the time to visit each other's schools? So this became the Sustainable Schools Residency Program. It was 2 immersive days and 5 school teams. And a school team had an administrator, a few teachers, and then some students. And it was the students and the teachers that led the workshop about what they were doing in their school. Because what you'll find when you start to visit other places is that climate actions are very unique to the community. But it doesn't mean that you can't get amazing ideas from what's going on elsewhere and then establish a network where you can help each other through this work. So my fourth key insight is follow your North Star. I want to share with you this quote that comes from Mama Tuisiwin, the new Indigenous Inclusion Directorate, because it's powerful. When we are born into this world, we come with a gift to help people live a good life. A person becomes an Oki site, a great heart, when they begin to share their gift. And when I talk about this notion of a North Star, it's really inviting students and teachers to have larger than self goals. Because when I talked about that shift that happens in schools, you know, and the neoliberal creep into schools about career readiness and serving your self goals, larger than self goals actually lead to a purposeful life and well-being. And so these are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. And it's just one framework you can use to do this work. But if I were to ask you to look at these 17 goals and identify, like, what is your North Star? What do you care most deeply about that's aligned with your gifts? What do you see as your North Star? Maybe even add it into the chat if you want to put it out there. So I share this because you might think that I'm hoping everybody's North Star is goal number 13, climate action. But that's actually not true. I would much rather that the students and the teachers that I work with, identify their North Star and serve that North Star. But if they have a North Star other than climate action, I want them to know it so well that they understand the complexities and they understand how all the goals are interrelated. Let me give you an example. I have a lot of, good friends who care about hunger, and they care about the huge amounts of hunger that's going on in the city right now. And so that's incredible. We need people working on zero hunger. But I too want them to understand that if you care about hunger and it's solving that problem, part of your good work involves climate action as well, because climate change is causing all sorts of food insecurity issues. It's affecting our ability to grow crops with floods and droughts. So it's all interconnected. But we need a whole diversity of larger than self goals out there. And this is excellent work that you can do with your students, just exploring their deepest cares and then serving those goals. So this is another dream team. This was a collaborative climate action learning team from last year in Seven Oaks School Division. And all of these teachers you see here committed to doing participatory action research for climate action at their school. And they had one goal, how do they grow the good at their school? That was it. And we used this action cycle, participatory action research cycle. Again, those questions, where are we now? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? What action are we going to take? So I'm just going to highlight what came of this in their different schools, because it's all amazing. And again, these actions are unique to the communities that they are a part of. So the first one I want to talk about is the work that Lindsay Torrio did at Garden City Collegiate. She started with wanting to understand what staff and students felt. So she did surveys with staff and students and found that there was really strong support. 91% of staff support climate action. 90% of students find value in this work. They then mobilized on a big professional development day. The whole PD day was on climate change education. I did a talk that day. They had this amazing panel you see at the bottom where teachers shared what they were doing. And I quickly realized in my work that a lot of teachers don't know what other teachers are doing. And I think that's really important to start to understand, because that's where you find your network, your people that can do the work with you. They also mobilized on a whole climate, they called it Earth Month. They had all sorts of events that teachers could be invited to participate in with students. And they did so many wonderful things with their Indigenous Cultural Credit students, who led workshops at the Climate Action Symposium and had all sorts of teachings by elders and knowledge keepers. This is H.C. Avery. The teacher who led the research there was Stephen Barkman. And you need to see the schoolyard. And if you don't have a chance to see it, I tried to put as many pictures as possible. But what they're doing there is really restoring their schoolyard and inviting biodiversity in. Have you heard of the Montreal Biodiversity Pledge? This is a big deal because Winnipeg signed the 2030 Montreal Biodiversity Pledge, which includes 30 by 30. Now, 30 by 30 is that we all have to do our part to conserve 30% of land as naturalized land for biodiversity by the year 2030. Imagine if every single school across Manitoba did this. Save 30% for nature. It invites biodiversity into your schoolyard. it teaches kids how to do this work beyond the schoolyard. So they have a prairie pothole that, in talking to teachers there, all sorts of wildlife flock to that when there's a drought in the summer because it's a water source. They're growing different types of mushrooms in the schoolyard. They have an outdoor kitchen area. They have a fruit orchard. And they also have this really interesting event called the Marigold Market. It's a student-led farmers market where students get to create things and sell things in the community. But HC Avery has a whole network of teachers doing this work. They've really found each other and embraced collaboration. Bella Ferreira at Forest Park School did action research to engage students in action projects. But what's really interesting is that Bella Ferreira is a learning support teacher for outdoor education. So she now supports all teachers in her school to learn outside on the land, land-based learning, place-based learning through the 4 seasons. And we need more positions like that because for teachers who don't necessarily know how to do that work, sometimes we just need mentorship to get started. They also did a community cleanup and found the need to really collect cigarette butts in their community. So lots of amazing work happening at that school. James Nisbet, I'm just going to share all of them because I'm telling you, every school did amazing work. James Nisbet, the teachers there, Daryl Riley and Alice Sherwin wanted to create an outdoor learning space in their schoolyard because they didn't have one. But they didn't want to do this work alone. They wanted to invite students to share their ideas. So they did this amazing week-long Earth Week activities, and part of that was inviting students to give feedback of what they wanted to see. They also have an eco club called the Eco Warriors that gets kids excited about taking action, and they were a big part of planning that Earth Week. And they now have started creating their outdoor classroom, and you can see the landscape design at the bottom right there. And Kurt Hangel over at Exchange Met really does amazing work with students. But this was one of the events they hosted at their school. And you can see here, it's pretty wordy, but to sum it up, this school values kids' gifts and what they care about. And so their climate actions and learning projects were very diverse because the kids led the way. They also did this really neat workshop that you see in the climate solutions tree on the left, where students were able to propose climate recommendations to make a difference in their school community. So you're getting kids involved in learning about climate change and making the recommendations for further action and where they can continue to grow the good. This is an amazing student club that comes from Maples Collegiate. They're called the Maples Eco Crew. They're one of the longest lasting eco clubs in all of Seven Oaks School Division. And it's really exciting because this year they actually have tri-presidents. So there's 3 students working together. We have a climate action forum coming up, and they're going to be part of the keynote address. They're going to be speaking to all the students and teachers there as well. And then there's teachers who build this into their classroom in intentional ways. And a good place to do this, if you don't know how to get started, is to really explore some of the existing opportunities out there. I'm going to share 2 of them with you. The first one is called the Future City Competition, and it's hosted by Engineers of Tomorrow. And at the top there, can you see that amazing city? The students built that model of a city. It's a climate resilient city called Eco Vista. And they actually won the Climate Change Warrior Peer Award last year for all of Canada. And another amazing program is Caring for Our Watersheds contest. So Lake Winnipeg is part of the massive Lake Winnipeg watershed, and that's part of the problem. The watershed spans 4 provinces and 2 US states. But this competition asks young people from grades 7 to 12, what bugs you in the environment and what are you going to do about it? So they have to really think about meaningful actions. But what's great about this contest is there is many submissions every year. Last year there was 366, and the judges will actually sit down and score them, and students who win top 10 will have their projects funded, so they get to carry them out. Really proud that 4 groups from Seven Oaks School Division placed in the top 10 last year. So this is the last key insight. We're nearing the end of the talk, and then I'm going to share some resources, but this is it. Don't panic, have a climate action plan. Whether you're planning for your classroom or your school division, this is a worthwhile article to read. Field and Howlett wrote about climate leadership within Canadian school boards. And really, school boards are in the perfect position to do this work because they're existing local democracies. So, good questions to ask. Has your local school board declared a climate emergency? Do you have somebody dedicated to this work of climate action in your school? Are teachers supported through professional development for climate change education? Is there some sort of existing plan to reduce greenhouse gases in line with the IPCC report and the Paris Agreement? Um, are there climate action plans in your school? Do you have a plan to reduce emissions locally in your school? And is there anybody who's accountable to these plans if there are plans? All great questions to ask. Now, climate action plans are popping up all over. So these are some of the resources I've shared, some of the action plans that I've discovered and draw inspiration with. And the hope this year is that Seven Oaks School Division, through a democratic approach, will start to form our own climate action plan too. So I do also want to say that having a network of people to do this work with has been transformative for me and many other teachers. So if you don't have that network, I would invite you to join this amazing group of teachers and administrators. We're called Educators for Climate Action Manitoba, and you can sign up for our newsletter using the QR code right there. We do advocacy work and offer professional development and also do partnerships. And I also set up this Google Drive where I just wanted to share with you some really good starting points. There's resources in there. I've included our Seven Oaks Climate Action Report to the community because that report highlights climate actions in all 28 of our schools. Really amazing to see the diversity of ideas out there. And then there's some teacher guides and some academic articles that I would recommend reading. And I'm going to leave you with this beautiful picture that was drawn last year by Haley at Victory School that says, one person could change the world. And maybe that person is you. So thank you so much. A lot of gratitude. I do want to welcome any questions that you may have, and I'm happy to answer them.
Awesome. Fantastic work, Heather. Wonderful presentation today. Yeah, as Heather said, if you want to throw your questions into the chat or the Q&A tabs there, um, Heather would welcome questions. Just so inspiring to hear from you, Heather. Like sometimes I get kind of down in the dumps, and then 10 minutes listening to your stories of work on the ground is so powerful. I think the things that stood out for me were that you spoke about the hope and the action cycle, right? And you can't have hope without action. Um, it's so important. And then, as teachers as well as students, I think we need to think about ourselves as well as the students. We can feel immobilized at times, and that hope and action cycle is so important. You also spoke to how we have a huge responsibility as educators, but also we have a huge opportunity here to change the trajectory for students. You identified a lot of really positive things happening in Seven Oaks School Division, but I think one of the things I've learned from the UNESCO Schools Project, which you spoke to, was that this is happening across Manitoba. And ways that we can learn about it is connecting and building capacity amongst our schools, as in terms of classroom teachers, learning support teachers, and across schools, across age levels, like you did with the climate leaders residency. I also want to give a shout out to Alison Fidek. I don't know if she's still on the call, but Winnipeg School Division recently appointed a version of Heather in Winnipeg School Division, doing anti-racism and climate action work. So if you're in Winnipeg School Division, contact Alison if you're looking to do this work. I guess we got a few questions in the chat here. Oh, we got a comment here from Leslie. Awareness is an action, action is action. Absolutely. Maybe I'll start up with a question for you, Heather. We've got a number of pre-service teachers on the call here, and what we know about a practicum when we're in the pre-service program is sometimes there's constraints of what we're being asked to teach, the grade level, topic areas or clusters. What might be some advice you could give to pre-service teachers who are going into their final year and heading into schools in less than 12 months' time? How might they begin this work?
I think it begins with your North Star. Do you know what you care about? What is your larger than self goal? And why are you in this incredible position of being a teacher? I absolutely love teachers because it's one of the most important jobs in the world. And the way that you bring stories into your class and inspire students to be the change, that can be really transformative to them. And of course, there's always limitations, right? But you have to start somewhere. And so I think even for new teachers, like, what is your plan? How are you going to incorporate this into what you do very intentionally? And so sometimes what I would do is think of a theme for a class that kind of is the overarching theme of what you do. And then you still teach your curriculum, right? But you just weave it into every day and provide opportunities for rich action projects. So I really moved away from the 1 week model project, like here's your model. And I usually kick off my course with some sort of, I actually like to kick off with collective action because students, if they're in traditional schools and being taught information in traditional ways, they might not know how to do deep learning through projects. And sometimes you have to model that for them. And then I let them go into their own inquiries and do that work from there.
Awesome. Thanks. Sage advice there, Heather. Dan's asking if you could throw up the Google Drive QR code again. Are you able to do that?
Yeah. Oh,
And just while we're waiting for Heather to do that, I just want to put in the chat again. I think it might have only gone to a few people, but if you missed the first two webinar workshops, they are now posted on YouTube, which you can access through the registration link online there. Heather, were you able to share that QR code?
oh, it's not. I thought I was sharing it right now, but maybe I'm not. So you can't see my screen. Hold on.
And while Heather's pulling that up, if anyone has any questions, they're welcome to put those in the chat or just put it in the Q&A as well.
Can you see that now?
Does that work for you, Dan? Nice. Thanks, Heather. Awesome. Any other questions from folks? Okay, wonderful. So, this work happens, I think, and Heather made this clear by pushing people, by making those connections. In school divisions, if you don't feel like much is happening, it's not as if Seven Oaks, as a division, made this happen overnight. This took folks pushing administrators, making connections, looking for grants, and so to grow the good in the schools. So I think that's one thing that really shined through in your presentation and your ongoing work, Heather. Any final comments, Heather, before we close for this evening?
I think if you're starting this work, try to make a difference, one initiative at a time, because I see too many people try to do too much.
Yeah.
And really what it takes is one good idea and inviting other people into that work. Because at the end of the day, your well-being matters too. We're all human. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Wonderful presentation. I'm leaving feeling full of hope. I really appreciate what you're doing. If folks are interested, next week we have our fourth webinar webinar workshop. It's going to be led by Christy Allen and Erica McPherson from the Prairie Climate Center, and they're going to be leading the first of two webinar workshops on climate justice. This one is going to focus on disability justice. So that'll be next Tuesday, starting at 4 o'clock. And I'm also happy to announce that we have a seventh webinar, which will be a second one on climate action or climate justice, sorry, led by Latika Raising-Haney, which will happen on Tuesday, November 12th. So we've got lots of fantastic stuff coming up. October 29th, we have Mike Link speaking on climate change education and children. November 5th, Heather Krepsky speaking on supporting youth with climate and eco-anxiety. So lots of good stuff coming up, and it's all based on what's happening in the Manitoba education system. If you've got any questions, you're welcome to reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you again, Heather. Really appreciate your ongoing work, and have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.